to do NFC North now. It's just me and Drew. Pookie had to go somewhere on this fine Memorial Day holiday. You know, he's a good-looking dude, socially active dude. No telling what he's up to right now. You know, I'm sure the girls were waiting for him to get out of the room and stop talking to us so he could finally talk to them. So it's just going to be Drew and I. For those of you listening at home, he and I are both doing the jersey thing now because I do have an NFC North jersey. Drew's got on a unfortunately timed Stephon Diggs Vikings jersey, and I've got an Aaron Rodgers Packers jersey, Super Bowl edition, Super Bowl 45. Maybe it's better that Pookie's gone when I put this jersey on because the Packers beat the Steelers. But
hey, man, fun fact, I was at that game. In Dallas. I was at that Super Bowl. My dad's friend, he bought us tickets in the nosebleeds, but I mean it's a Super Bowl, so it doesn't matter what seat you have. He was a huge Packers fan. He sat in the first tier. We sat in the nosebleeds, and he bet a lot of money on the Packers, and he was super happy that they won because he won all of his money back and some more.
Dude, I had no idea because I know you go to a lot of NFL games. I never knew you went to a freaking Super Bowl.
I'll be honest with you. I don't remember a lot of it. I was too young. I need to go to another one. No, I was like 10 years old.
Hey, that doesn't – dude, have you seen LSU fans?
Yikes.
I'm serious on that one. We'll get into that in a different episode, but could not be more real with you. That's crazy, dude. I had no idea. Like, I knew they reserved, like, a certain small number of tickets for a Super Bowl, like, just for regular fans, but I thought so many of them went to, like, corporate sponsors for employees and for gift packages and stuff. I had no idea that.
Yeah, you can buy. I'm going to more Super Bowls. I don't care.
Yeah, well, the way your Colts are trending, maybe you get to see your boys play. So, I don't know. You know, it's funny. I said you have an unfortunately timed jersey now that Diggs is with the Bills, but who knows how much longer this jersey is appropriate.
Exactly.
And we'll have all the time in the world to get into that. So, where to start, man? The NFC North. So, Drew, in the past, we've been talking about the most competitive divisions, the division most likely to get 3 teams into the playoffs. This division is not it. This division's not getting 3 teams into the playoffs, but the more I think about it, they have they're putting on their stake for maybe the most competitive division in the NFL. You look at these win over-under totals. I've got Green Bay and Minnesota at straight 9, Chicago at 8.5, Detroit at 6.5. So there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, I had not considered this division to be the most competitive, but looking back, I should have. What are just looking at the division in total, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, I mean, when we talk about them, we can go ahead and talk about Detroit because I think they're the oddball out. But as an overall division, I think the North has always been competitive, and I think they've always been overshadowed by tougher divisions with the NFC West now, the NFC East for so many years before. But every time you watch a NFC North game, whether it's the Bears, Lions, the Packers, Vikings, the Packers, Lions, Packers, whoever, they're always they're always big games. They're always, rival games because they've been in the same division for many of years. They're always tough games, especially whenever you have to go to Green Bay in December and play, or you were playing in Chicago and it's a below freezing game and you're playing. So I think they're always tough games and they're always competitive. I just think that there's other divisions out there that have multiple teams that are always better than them because like the ratings are saying, no one's going to be over 10 wins per their over under. So I believe that they're still tough. I just think that they don't have those couple dominant teams like the NFC West has this year.
No, and it's strange because the Packers, obviously, if you listen to the podcast enough, you'll get to understand how I feel about Aaron Rodgers. You've heard me, you and I talk about this all the time. You know how I feel about Aaron Rodgers. Just that sustained excellence over time. It's really been him carrying that team because that roster, if you look at it, is not that good. In my opinion, to just keep winning over time. The Bears a few years ago, I thought, ooh, they're in a position now. I was never sold on Trubisky, but I liked the direction that team was heading. And ever since they double doinked, I'm double doinking on my opinions on the Bears. I have no idea how to feel about them. Hey, the team's only as good as their kicker. They've always had place kicking trouble, so that's really just a joke, honestly. But to be said. But the Vikings, man, I've been big on the Vikings because Mike Zimmer, that defense is always going to be pretty solid. I still like Kirk Cousins. I know a lot of other people don't. And I don't know where to rank him necessarily. Like, he's a guy who can go out and have a 350-yard game if he needs to. Or he can hand it off to Dalvin Cook 30 times a game. So I don't know what to expect out of Kirk Cousins. You get rid of Stephon Diggs, but just looking back over the past 3 to 4 years, I've always thought the Vikings should be winning the division. If you go in the last 4 years, I thought they should have won the division twice. I thought the team was that good, but for whatever reason, that bad man just keeps getting it done. So I don't know. If there was ever a year that the Vikings do it, it's this year to me. So
I think with the Vikings, they lost a lot on defense. Linval Joseph, they lost Everson Griffin, who hasn't signed anywhere yet, but he's not on the team. Xavier Rhodes, they lost a lot of big pieces that have been there for a lot of years. But I do agree, Mike Zimmer is a great defensive coach. I think he'll have him in the right spot. They still have Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr. They still have a lot of talented guys. Trey Waynes on the cornerback, but I just think they lost a lot of big-name guys. They have Daniel Hunter, though, on the D-line, that they're not going to be as dominant on defense, and they're going to need to lean more on Kirk Cousins and Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen on the offensive side, which I think doesn't bode well for the Vikings. They lost Stephon Diggs and their OC, who's now in Cleveland. So I think they lost a lot of things that potentially has them fighting for a wild card. I still think the Packers are going to win the division because the Packers brought back a lot of the same guys, and they didn't draft well because they drafted Jordan Love, in my opinion. They didn't help them win games this year, but I think they still are the better team overall.
I think for me, time will tell with the Packers because didn't they go 13-3 last year?
Yeah.
That team is not a 13-3 team to me. They're not. They're like a 10-6 team at best. You have one of those teams every 2 to 3 years where you're like, they're not as good as their record. Like, honestly, the Patriots were a team like that this year because we had an insanely easy schedule, and we just weren't that good. And the defense was putting up those historic numbers. But when you look back at the teams they were playing, we were playing against guys who were saying they saw ghosts.
Yeah. So, and I mean, you think about it, the Bears a couple of years ago weren't a great team. They came out of nowhere with that great defense, and they made it in the playoffs. So, and they were a field goal away from, advancing. So, I think that's why it makes this division always a tough division, because every game is going to be a hard fought match. There's no easy games. And I don't think there's one dominant team out there that's like you're super scared of. And I think you see that in the odds, with the Vikings and the Packers both being at 9 wins.
With the Packers, I just don't know how much better they got. And that's why I say this is the year for the Vikings to do it, because I know they retained a lot of that talent. I've got Jair Alexander and I've got 2 great pass rushers. But I as far as that offense goes, I don't know. I just don't know how much better they got. And again, this all remains to be seen until that ball is kicked, until we see what they actually look like. And my number one rule in life is to never count out Aaron Rodgers. Let's kick it off with the team that's expected to do the least, who in reality, I kind of like what they're doing. I'm not sure. I love their uniforms. Love the uniforms. And there's
looking into Detroit's schedule, we talked about it earlier. They could easily start off 0-4. I believe they could start off 2-2. That's their best case scenario right there. But you have the Saints and at Green Bay. Those are tough games that you're probably going to lose. You're at Arizona, which is a tough place to play. And then you're against the Bears, which, again, I think is a tough game. At Jacksonville, easy dub. Falcons, I feel like that's a toss-up game, but I'm probably giving it to the Falcons.
Falcons.
You play the Colts, the Vikings next. Those are probably 2 L's. You've got the Skins. It's probably a win. At Carolina, another toss-up game. Texans, and then at Chicago, Green Bay, at Tennessee, Tampa Bay, Vikings. Like, they could easily end the season on a losing streak. It just depends on, how the season's going. Those late games are hard to tell what's going to happen just because you don't know how momentum's going. But I think 6 wins is a good number, or 6.5 is a good number for them. I see them getting anywhere between 4 and probably 7 is probably the most I see them getting.
I'm taking the under just looking at their schedule. You get the NFC South, and you had just said the Falcons. I don't know how I messed that one up. Yeah, I like so we talked about the NFC South in an earlier episode. I like the Falcons going into this season. I think they've got a lot to prove and the weapons to do it. With the Lions, I'm looking at their first 10 to 11 games. I'm looking at maybe 2-9 as a possibility, with the Redskins and the Jaguars being the only 2 teams who I think the Lions might be better than. Of course, you've in the NFL, no game's easy, right? So, and like you said, they've got some winnable games, but that worst case scenario is not looking really good. You're looking at tough games and a very real possibility, as you said, of going 0-4, 2 divisional games right off the bat. An early bye week as well.
Yeah,
so it's tough. But my thing with Detroit is, what's a bad season for Detroit? I would have them going under just because of the schedule, but I don't know how bad that is. Yeah. I mean, hey, maybe you're tanking a little bit. Maybe you can get your replacement for Matt Stafford. Who knows how many good years he has left? Do you want to move on with him? So
I'll say this about Detroit. I personally have a weird relationship with them because I don't know why, but I've always loved them since they've had Megatron. I think Matt Stafford's a great NFL quarterback, just on a very bad team. They've always had weapons there that just spark my interest in the team. I love Kenny Golladay right now. I think he's a very, very underrated wide receiver. And if you watch the receivers episode, I talk about it a little bit. Marvin Jones is great. They just drafted Robert Swift. DeAndre Swift, sorry. Yeah. So they have great weapons for Matt Stafford. They have Kerryon Johnson there already. And they drafted TJ Hawkinson last year. They have great weapons offensively. I just don't think they've been able to put everything together as a whole team. They're kind of in the same boat as the Cleveland Browns. They're kind of cursed as a franchise, I feel like.
Well, here's one thing I will say about a team who is down in the dumps and needs to rebuild. You want to have some older heads coming in who can right the ship, who know, about championship character. So let me give you a little stat here, Drew. Projected going into the season, the Detroit Lions will have 4 defenders on their starting defense who played for the New England Patriots at one point or another. They just traded for former pass safety Deron Harmon. You got Trey Flowers, Arkansas boy. Let's go, baby. First team All-SEC back in the day. All them sacks. Let's see, Danny Shelton and Jamie Collins. So that's the way to start off with. You're right about the roster. One thing I wanted to bring up is you get Darius Slay out of there. I don't really remember that whole saga going on, but it seemed like he was kind of unhappy with Detroit, and they were trying to get him out of there. And you end up with, Desmond Trufant.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a scenario where you get a 2-for-1. So I get Desmond Trufant and I get Jeff Okudah, who, the Lions were high on. So I go give me a cornerback who potentially could be a top cornerback in the league on a rookie contract. I get Darius Slay out of there for the big money. So, and I forget that they've got another cornerback in there who they like. I can find his name real quick, but I like Justin Coleman. So
yeah, you're
looking decent on defense, at least in the secondary.
Yeah, they definitely have an interesting roster top to bottom. I just don't know how talented they are to date. But I think a couple of years, but I always feel like Detroit's always in a rebuilding stage. They're never in a contending stage. They're never competitive. Even when they had Calvin Johnson, they were still terrible. And it just sucked that they were never good with him.
My thing with the Lions is with Matt. I agree with you with Matt Stafford. He can put up the numbers, and he's got some weapons to use. I love Hawkinson, man. Give me an Iowa tight end. Give me an Iowa offensive lineman, and let's go, baby. We're going to the freaking Super Bowl. All right? That's what I need. And, oh, my gosh, my guy, Frank Ragnow on the offensive line, the nastiest SOB from the University of Arkansas. I love what the Lions – so you got Trey Flowers, Frank Ragnow. You used to have Travis Swanson too. So we had hogs all over the place. That's the recipe to win, baby. But on offense, okay, yeah. In the pros, Drew, in the pros, not in college. In the pros. So you mentioned DeAndre Swift, Galladay, Marvin Jones Jr., Hawkinson. You've got some pieces in there that you can – Danny Amendola too, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the pieces there. With Matt Stafford, though, injuries have been a problem with him as of late. So with the contract situation, which has got to be coming up in the near future, unfortunately I don't have his contract in front of me. I don't know how many years he has left on it since he signed that mega deal back in the day. The tricky thing with the Lions is they're not expected to do much, but how much of a leash is Matt Patricia getting this year? I feel like they have to win a few games.
Yeah,
I don't know how many they can win.
Yeah, I think he was on the hot seat last year, and I think going into this year he's not in a great position.
I hate the fact that coaches are on the hot seat in their second year. It takes time. It takes time. Unless you lose the locker room, the culture's getting bad. Things are obviously going downhill. Freddie Kitchens is an example. That was just a bad hire to begin with. What are we doing there? So that's my biggest question for the Lions has to be Matt Patricia himself is what does he have to do to keep his job? I want to see Matt Stafford play a whole season healthy and see what he's able to do. That defense, we mentioned some of the names, see how good they are in some places. But I don't know what to expect of the Lions, man. Yeah. And the only thing I can say is that schedule is tough enough that I don't see them winning in more than 6 games. But I do have my eye on them. I like the moves they're making, but the only problem is those moves may not pay off right away. And what does that mean for Matt Patricia? So as long as he's got that beard, he's got that pencil behind his ear, he might be able to pull some magic out of the hat yet. Who knows?
I think another coach that's kind of been on the hot seat the last couple of years is Matt Nagy in Chicago. Again in
transition, Drew. You're learning the game, baby.
In the same division, but I think with when it comes to Chicago's problem is they've been hurt and they put all their eggs in a basket that wasn't a good basket. And Mitchell Trubisky, I think he wasn't as good coming out of college. He only had 1 year as a starter at North Carolina, and he just hasn't really produced like they thought he was going to. And in that same draft class, you have Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. Think about how good the Bears would have been today if they would have had one of those two quarterbacks. I think they would be the NFC North division champion for years to come with that defense that they have. And I think as every team kind of figures out, money becomes a problem, and I think their defense has lost some guys due to money issues. And I just don't think they're still competitive. I don't see them as an 8.5 wins. Because I think Trubisky is that bad.
It's really easy to hammer on the Bears in hindsight. What I would say, scouts see things differently with quarterbacks. They see things differently with so many players. My thing with some of these quarterbacks, and it goes to Trubisky, I've got a guy who's only played like one solid year of football. I think he had a really good year before – gosh, I don't remember if he was a senior or not when he was drafted, but it's like the year before there was talk about him going into the season as being like, hey, this guy might be the number 1 quarterback in the country. Mm-hmm. But we don't see a lot, and he's also playing in the ACC. I don't even think he plays in Clemson's division. So you don't see him play Clemson, and that they got smoked, I'm pretty sure, in the ACC championship game.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of tape to go out. And honestly, sometimes it's better for these quarterbacks to not have a lot of tape going into the draft process because there isn't as much to critique. You see a lot of the big throws, but you don't see many of the places where he struggles. And even though Trevor Lawrence is arguably the greatest quarterback prospect we've had since Andrew Luck, scouts will still find parts in his game to dissect just because he has more years on tape.
Yeah.
But Trubisky, that wasn't the case. I would say for Mahomes, I never got to see him work out in person, what he did for scouts. And they have, dude, just one NFL scout alone has so much more experience than I could ever have. They have all this information, all the stats on hand. But with Deshaun Watson, I would say is I've got a proven winner who won. Mm-hmm. So my question would be to the scouts, what did you see with Trubisky that you didn't see with Watson. Because with Mahomes, I saw him play and tear up Arkansas, and I saw some of his other games, but he didn't blow me away when I watched him. I didn't think his game transcended to the NFL. Deshaun Watson, on the other hand, I did see enough to say, what did y'all see with Trubisky that you didn't see with Watson?
Yeah.
So that's where I think it's fair to critique the Bears.
Yeah.
I would have to know what other teams saw with Mahomes, but I do agree that Trubisky contract hurt him.
Yeah,
but just having him.
Yeah, and I think also they haven't done a great job with even at the quarterback position, whoever they had, they didn't do a great job surrounding him with weapons. I think Allen Robinson's another receiver in that division that's actually very talented, and he came in with a torn ACL, so his first year, he didn't really play much. But last year he actually had a really good year, even though Trubisky was terrible. But that's kind of it. Tariq Cohen's is a great weapon. He's kind of like an Austin Eckler, but he's also like 5'9", and he can't really run in between the tackles that well. But he's just a scary weapon. And David Montgomery didn't have a great year, and they thought he was going to come in and have a great year. But I just think they haven't had the best weapons around Trubisky or whoever the quarterback was, even Chase Daniel, for them to even be successful. So I think the organization as a whole hasn't done a great job on the offensive side of the ball to help them win games. Defensively, they've had great success with their, whether through draft or, they traded for Khalil Mack. They made some great moves on defense, but with the trade for Khalil Mack, they sent away a lot of picks, and it hasn't really come back to help them. They haven't been drafting high.
Right. So on defense, you're looking at Kyle Fuller, who on any given day is one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL. Mm-hmm. You talked about some of the acquisitions they made on defense this year. Robert Quinn, the contract's a little interesting there. 5 years, $70 million. What are you going to get? It's a pretty expensive contract. You do get Artie Burns, former first-round pick for the Steelers. But, when we're talking about the Bears and offseason acquisitions, it begins and ends with the quarterback acquisition they made with Nick Foles.
Yeah, Big Dick Nick.
Yeah, and it's pretty big, unfortunately, found out. I do believe he starts day one. Unfortunately, I think you have to eat your losses with Trubisky. And I think Nick Foles probably does give you the best chance to win, unless that this pandemic has just not being able to be in the rooms and meetings. If there's something out there hampering his development with learning the offense, that just gives Trubisky that little advantage there. I got to go with Nick Foles.
I think Nick Foles' best form is allowing Trubisky to play and not do great or get hurt, and Nick Foles come in as a backup, because we've seen him as a starter before not be very successful. But I totally agree. I think the only thing that Trubisky has over Nick Foles is Trubisky can run. I think when they were doing good a couple of years ago, they were successful when he ran. But I think Nick Foles is just a better quarterback overall. I think he's a better arm. He's more intelligent probably than Trubisky when it comes to reading defenses. I think Trubisky's only good at reading half the field. And I think that takes away from Matt Nagy, because I think Nagy's a really good coach. He stems from Andy Reid's system, uses some of the similar things as Andy Reid, but he's only able to use half of his playbook because his quarterback's not great. So I think if you take Nick Foles and you put him in Trubisky's spot, the playbook opens up a little bit more. You lose a couple like read options here and there, but you can still run it. Just Nick Foles needs to give it every time. But I think that's what's holding Nagy back too. So I think he's a great OC. I don't know if he's a great head coach just yet, but his playbook hasn't been opened up as much as he probably wants.
I honestly thought they were one of the favorites for Cam Newton to land. I had a feeling Cam Newton might end up with the Bears. And I like I like them bringing in Nick Foles. I think you need that veteran presence. To me, and I mentioned this with Matt Patricia, these guys need time. What is Nagy going into his fourth year with the Bears?
It's third or fourth year. His first year was the same year as Trubisky, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, there were times where I really liked Matt Nagy, and I don't know if the roster is really helping him out here. So I'd like to see him get a few more years to prove himself for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely want to talk about Jimmy Graham for a second. Okay, you have Trey Burton on the roster already, so he's gone now. He's with your guys. Oh gosh, who else do they have? Adam Shaheen, does that sound right? Tight
Yeah,
end?
they drafted him a couple years ago.
Yeah.
They have so I believe before the offseason they had 10 tight ends on the
They
roster. I don't
did.
know
That's
them.
right.
I don't know them by name besides a handful.
You're
And
right. That's crazy.
they dropped Trey Burton. One thing about Trey Burton is he was hurt the entire time he was in Chicago. He was never healthy, played through injuries, was never healthy. That's why he was never able to be full Trey Burton. But then this year you go out and you sign Jimmy Graham to a fat contract. Somehow he gets these contracts even though he's probably the worst starting tight end in the NFL. He couldn't even be successful with Rodgers as his quarterback in
Can you
Green
believe
Bay.
we're saying that after the years he had with New Orleans? Can you believe
Yeah.
we're sitting here saying that right now? There was that conversation where if you were taking a tight end between him and Gronkowski about 8 years ago, that's a legitimate question.
Exactly.
It really
Yeah.
was.
But then the crazy thing is they go out with their first pick in this draft, they draft Cole Kmet,
Yeah.
which I think he's a great tight end. You know, being from Notre Dame, I know a lot about him, but I think he went to the wrong team. You know, he might be successful with them, but I don't think they needed him. I think they had a lot of options at tight end, I think they needed to go elsewhere to help build their team, but they went tight end. So
Yeah. Well, Jimmy Graham, the thing is, and you can assess different parts of his game. Earlier in his career, the talent was there. I mean, he arguably was you can make a case he was the greatest tight end in football at the time.
mm-hmm.
I won't say that because I love my 87, even though he's went to Tampa Bay. But the man went absent in Green Bay. And no matter whose fault that is, I can't ignore that.
Mm-hmm.
But his run blocking is also absent. He can't run block. And it seems like with Chicago drafting Cole Kmet, I would imagine they like that two tight end set. That the NFL more and more you're starting to see more two tight end sets. The Patriots are obviously going back to that with drafting two tight ends with two of their picks. So you take a guy who can't pass block, who can't run block. But here's the best way for me to assess the Jimmy Graham acquisition. The Steelers picked up Eric Ebron for less money.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to give out that much money to a tight end, I want Eric Ebron.
Exactly.
So to me, there are several NFL insiders that say Jimmy Graham, that pickup was the worst offseason acquisition for any team across the league. The Bears, to me, are in a scenario just where maybe they pull off some of those games. At the top, like I mentioned earlier, Green Bay, I don't know how much better they got. Minnesota, I'm not sure how much better they got. You know, you lose Stephon Diggs. That's obviously just one piece of the puzzle, and he's a receiver. So, But I don't know how much better those teams got. The Bears, like you said, great defense. We think you got an all-world pass rusher, which can really save your butt at times, and one-man wrecking crew at times. I don't know. I would certainly take the under based on the schedule, but I can see where, you know, with the NFC South, 1 and 3 is more likely. With the AFC South,
Probably
I don't know.
2-2.
I don't know. You know, it really comes down to me, it's more the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
Although, sign me up for whatever reason. This sounds like an NFL London game, Tennessee and Chicago. It's like a weird matchup, but sign me up for that one. I think that's a good barometer for both teams to see where they are, especially Chicago, though.
Yeah. So
I could see them winning 8 games. 9 games would certainly be good. My thumbs up for them. Now, where's Matt Nagy on this hot seat? In terms of hot seat, like, there's certainly a number to where he gets fired if you only win this amount of games. But what justifies keeping him around another year? To me, I don't think 7-9 is.
I think if he goes 7-9, he's probably there next year. But I think his seat gets hotter. I think each year that he doesn't make the playoffs, his seat gets hotter. But I think he's going to have a couple years there before before they move on from him.
I would say 8-8 is he goes into next season with a lot of question marks. But I don't even know if 5-11 gets him fired necessarily. I just think that raises a lot of questions because that That roster's another iffy to be seen. We don't know. We just don't know.
Yeah.
Same way with the Lions.
Yeah. But I mean, when you
though, you say they go 2-0 against the Lions. I'm telling you, it's like the NFL just has a weird way of working, man. That team from the bottom will come up and nap you, and you don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, when we're talking about rosters, I believe the two best rosters, obviously, in this division are the Vikings and the Packers. And really, it's to pick your poison on who you believe is going to win. You know, they're both at 9 at the over under. I mean, we're wearing Packers. Well, I'll let Sandy talk about the Packers, and I'll talk about the Vikings a little bit. But you know, they're both great teams, top to bottom. You know, we've seen the Vikings have success in the playoffs against the Saints the last couple of years and make it to the NFC Championship a couple of years ago. You know, the Packers was in the NFC Championship last year. So these teams are well represented in the NFC. It's been a minute since they've gotten over that hump and to the Super Bowl. So do you believe this could be the year for one of these teams, Sandy?
No. Listen, I held up my jersey when you were talking about the two best rosters. To me, it comes down to this guy, number 12. Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, but Rodgers is capable of magic. That magic has won the division these past few years. And just because I think Green Bay and Minnesota are on equal footing, Rodgers is what puts the Packers above for now. It's because I know what he can do. Mm-hmm. But that, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I really think the way to go for Green Bay was to say, listen, we either go get one of these receivers. Let's give Aaron one more weapon. But also what's concerning is how San Francisco – Drew, has Raheem Mostert stopped running yet? I think he's still going.
Yeah, he probably still is.
I think he's at about 800 yards right now on that defense, dude. Like, they have serious issues on the defense that the 49ers will continue to exploit. From what I've seen, Matt LaFleur wants to go more to that running offense like Kyle Shanahan. That's great, but I don't think the Packers – well – this is just seen from their number one pick. They didn't improve in the areas to me where they had to improve to be a contender this year. I thought at least if I go out and get, let's say, Justin Jefferson, who's coincidentally with the Vikings. Mm-hmm. Justin Jefferson gives me someone in the slot who can also line up out wide, who makes defenses respect you, and that gives Rodgers one more weapon. And maybe that's the difference between them winning one or two games here or there. But no, they're not good enough right now for me to even think about them going toe-to-toe with the 49ers. The Saints are better to me. I don't know what the Buccaneers are, but I know what they are on paper. And on paper, I like them in a one-off with the Packers. And the best thing is we get to see it, baby. Mm-hmm. We get to see it. A-Rod and Tom, another time. So, no, Green Bay to me is not, unfortunately – I love the Packers franchise, man. That's an iconic franchise. And again, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I royally think they screwed up here because you still have a quarterback who can go out and win you games. You got to help him out. They didn't. And I could be proven wrong. Jordan Love may end up being great. But for so many reasons that we listed in earlier episodes, it was bad timing, bad pick. And even if he does okay, you can't convince me otherwise. So Packers are not Super Bowl winners, not contenders. The Vikings – I think the Vikings might be better off in the playoffs than the Packers. They're built a little better. Well, they gave the 49ers a better game, remember?
Yeah.
And I've got Dalvin Cook. You want to talk about a team who can run the ball? Minnesota can run the ball. Wasn't there a game where Kirk Cousins threw like 6 passes, maybe 5 passes?
Yeah. I thought it was Jimmy G.
Well, Jimmy G did it too in the playoffs, but there was a game where Dalvin Cook got the ball like 30 times.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that was earlier in the regular season. That was like weeks 5 or 6, somewhere around there. I like Minnesota. I just don't know like you said, you lose some pieces on defense, especially with Everson Griffin. I love Adam Thielen. And I was just talking about Justin Jefferson. He's now with the Vikings. I think the Vikings are better built in the playoffs to win a game than the Packers, but that's not saying much in my opinion.
Yeah, I think both teams are playoff teams. I think they're going to be in the playoffs. I think once they're in the playoffs, they're probably going to be a tough team to beat. But, especially if you have to go to Lambeau, I think that's the biggest thing for the Green Bay Packers is if they have home games in the playoffs, that's a tough place to win. But you have to do your work in the regular season. They were again an inch away if the Niners lost the Seahawks to being the number 1 seed last year in the NFC.
That's
and
crazy.
that could have changed a lot because again, playing in Lambeau is a very tough place to play, especially in December, and with them wanting to go to run the ball and be more of a defensive team, that makes it even tougher to play in Lambeau. But I agree with you. I think both teams don't really have a chance to make it to the Super Bowl. I wouldn't be surprised though to see like Rodgers in there just because of how Rodgers is. He does have a Mahomes like magic to him. So I think if you give him the chance, he has a chance to lead him to the Super Bowl. But I don't think you get that with the Vikings. I think the Vikings are probably a more complete team, just because I think Rodgers really doesn't really like the OC and the head coach as much because he's not throwing the ball as much. So I think there's a little line in the sand. There's a little distance between the coaching staff and the players just for that reason. But I think both teams are very good. I think they're both great rosters or great organizations. You gotta love when there was nothing better than watching what's his name, Case Keenum do the skull a couple years ago in the Minneapolis Miracle. That was great to watch. So I think both places are games that I want to go see at, and I think it's partly because the teams are so great and the organizations are ran really well. And then when you look at Minnesota, again they play in Seattle. They play against the Cowboys at home. They play Tampa and the Saints away. So I think those are tough games for both teams, where that's probably why they are at 9 wins, because they have a lot of tough road games, not just games in general. They have to go to these tough stadiums, places like Seattle and San Francisco, and play away games. So.
Yeah. And if my schedule, the one I'm reading, is correct, they have also got the Saints away.
Yeah, both teams have the Saints away and both teams have the Bucs away.
Yeah.
So those are some tough games.
I don't know how tough the Bucs are to play away. I mean, they got a good roster, but I don't know how good. Well, I mean, it's a good team.
Yeah, I mean, but think about it though. Tampa weather is different than up north. It can be real humid.
Dude, yeah. I mean, like we said from the beginning, insanely important division, competitive division. We did that episode where we were talking about the week 1 matchups we were most excited for. I didn't mention it, but Green Bay at Minnesota, man, or I think it might be Minnesota at Green Bay. I'm not sure if you.
It's at Minnesota.
Dude, listen, man. I'm all about tone setting right away. What do we look? Setting the tone for the rest of the season. To me, that game is. You talk about Tampa Bay and New Orleans being a big one. The big names are involved too, but that game, that week 1 matchup, Green Bay Minnesota, is, to me, it's huge. Mm-hmm. Because it gives those two teams who are going to be neck and neck, we feel like one of them's going to get a leg up on the other. And I don't think they play each other again until midway through the season. I'm not sure. Maybe later in the season.
Yeah, they play week 8.
I think it's massive. I mean, every divisional game is massive, but this they all count the same. I'm going to keep throwing cliches at you one and again. Very curious to see how that game goes. And honestly, if I could only watch one game in week 1, it might be that one. Because this division is so close. And if the Bears are getting some respect at 8.5, so if the Bears are as good as USA Today thinks they're going to be, that game could be huge for
the rest of the season.
I don't know. Yeah, and seeding too. It's a massive game. And how do the Packers look? The more the Vikings are. If I'm the Vikings, man, I do the same thing that San Francisco did. We're putting our fingers in the dirt or the turf, and we're going. Yeah. White knucklers. That's what we call them. Yeah.
so coming out of the South or coming out of the North, who do you have as the division winner, and who do you have making the playoffs?
It's tough, Drew. It's tough. And really, I'm serious when I say this. The jersey I'm wearing is the only reason why I'm going with Green Bay. I've said so many disparaging things about them. I really honestly have not said anything good about them other than Aaron Rodgers himself. But in a division this neck and neck, it pays to have the best quarterback, and they've got the best quarterback. Even though I love that, I like that, I love it. Kirk Cousins, man, one of the best stadiums in the league. Screw Philly, but I'll go with Green Bay for now, just because of number 12.